Launching on October 21st over on GameFound is Lords of Ragnarok, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 90 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a re-implementation of the game Lords of Hellas, which is a game that I know a lot of people love, and it has a really great ranking of 241 over on Board Game Geek, which is really impressive. And this one is going to be my pick of the week. And I don't know exactly how to feel about that because I'm personally not a huge fan of Awaken Realms. I don't like that they have so much plastic in their games. I feel like a lot of the miniatures are unnecessary and just take up way too much space, cause shipping to just go through the roof, and then just makes the game more fiddly because I have all these different miniatures that I'm juggling between. They've also released a few games in the past that I personally felt weren't at a quality level in terms of design that's acceptable for release into the public. And I know that a lot of other people really like these games, so don't just take my word for it. But to me personally, I felt like these games just weren't ready for release, and they just have a few design flaws that I just think are unacceptable in any game. But I'm happy to say that I don't have these same concerns for Lords of Ragnarok, and there's a few reasons for that. The first is that this is a re-implementation of a game that I don't think shared any of those flaws that I just mentioned. And whenever you make a re-implementation of a game, it's a great opportunity to take feedback from your players and make some improvements and tweaks to make your game more streamlined, easier to play, and more exciting, while cutting out anything that may have bogged the game down. Lords of Hellas was a game that I always wanted to play, but I never did get the chance to, so I don't know how different this one is from Lords of Hellas or what exactly the changes are, but I did go into depth for the rules on this one, and I can say that they look quite solid. And the main components of this game are the main board that's split into different realms with some different regions on them, and then there's also an action wheel that will go in the middle of the board in this black space here. And each game you're going to have different monsters put out in the different regions on the board, and each monster has its own different abilities as well as weaknesses that they are susceptible to. Loki is the strongest monster of them all, and you can't actually attack Loki until you've defeated 2 other monsters on the board. There's a few different troops that players can play as, and they each have their main hero as well as a hero insert, and that's going to get placed into this player board along with a bunch of other miniatures, including some different priest tokens, your boat token, and your troop tokens. So in terms of miniatures for this game, it looks like there's going to be roughly the same amount that you would find in a game of Blood Rage, which I think is the perfect amount of miniatures. I personally wouldn't mind seeing a few more different monsters and final bosses, so if they add 10 to 12 more miniatures by the end of the campaign, I think that's perfectly acceptable. But we'll see how out of control this gets by the end of the campaign. There's also a couple of these destructible and buildable monuments that players can put their priests into to earn some different benefits, and these will also be placed out on the board at the start of the game, but starting with just the base. And you can't really see it in this image, but each of these miniatures actually has a little wheel in the base that's going to display the amount of strength that that miniature has. And of course, this is an area control game, so it's important to note that the different regions on the map have different numbers on them. And in order to control that region of the map, you need to have a presence there with a total strength equal or greater than that number. And on your player board, you can see 3 different tracks. There's the authority track, the strength track, and the wisdom track. And you'll be able to upgrade these throughout the game, but they dictate different things like the strength of your miniatures, as well as the maximum strength of a region that you can control, and the number of cards that you can draw when you go to draw cards, and the maximum number of cards that you can have in your hand. There's also a hero slot on the board where you can slot in your character's hero tile, and that's going to dictate your unique ability and your player miniature that you're going to be playing with. There's also a slot for an origin tile, and origin tiles grant you another special ability, but these are not unique to your characters. Instead, you're going to be drawing 2 tiles at the start of the game and then choosing the one that you want to play with. And on a player's turn, there's a number of actions that you can perform. You can either pray to send priests to monuments, and when you do that, you're going to gain benefits that scale with the completion of the monument. So if you send a priest to a more completed monument, you're going to get more benefits for that. You'll also be able to heal wounds if you've accumulated any wounds on your player tracks, as well as move player miniatures around on the board. And my favorite action is that you can spend rune tokens that you've collected throughout the game to perform a whole list of rune-specific actions that get stronger the more runes that you spend. The catch here is that if you want to spend more than 1 token, the tokens have to have different icons on them, so that means that you can never spend 2 of the same rune tokens together. But some of these actions can be to gain control of different monsters, activate a monster, make alliances with neutral realms for special bonuses, increase the strength of your army, make additional movements, draw additional cards, or increase your stats, or deploy more troops. At the end of the round, players can place their player tokens out on the action wheel to perform some additional actions, and this will allow players to do some bonus things like attempt to take control of regions after the round, as well as build monuments or temples and activate different realms to benefit the players there. A neat aspect of this game is that it offers both PvP and PvE combat, but if you're fighting against a monster that's not player controlled, the player to your left will take control of that monster temporarily just to act as the environment as you fight against it. Of course, they also want to do a good job so you don't get too far ahead, so you can expect a real challenge. Players will be using combat cards to fight against each other and perform some special abilities, but monsters also come with a monster card that has a bunch of icons listed on it, and the player fighting against that monster will have to discard combat cards that match those icons in order to defeat that monster. PvP also uses combat cards, and then player's strength in the region is also going to come into play, and the player with the highest strength at the end of a battle wins that battle. And this game has 4 different win conditions. The first is that if you defeat Loki, you win the game immediately, or you can try to build 5 temples in 5 different regions, or control all regions within 3 realms. The 4th way is triggered by in-game events and is known as Ragnarok. At the start of the game, 5 Ragnarok cards were randomly drawn, and they display different objectives on them. If 3 of 5 cards are completed, it's going to trigger the final round. After that round, the player that controls most regions around the action wheel wins the game. And of course, don't forget to follow the campaign page before it starts because you'll get a free Valkyrie hero added to your pledge.